The massive alien vessel hung above Terra like a dark thunderhead, its metallic surface reflecting the sunlight in strange patterns. Commander Rylan stood at the control center of Orbital Station Artemis, his weathered hands gripping the console as he watched the transmission from the Celestial Concord unfold. "Your species is too aggressive, too unpredictable," the alien representative stated, its silvery skin gleaming under the lights of its chamber. "We have observed your history, your wars, your conflicts. You cannot be trusted with the power of interstellar travel." Rylan felt his jaw tighten. Terrans had only recently developed their first faster-than-light drive, and within months the Concord had appeared. They hadn't come to welcome Terra into a galactic community, they had come to contain it. "We have the right to explore the stars," Rylan responded, knowing his words were being translated and broadcast to the Concord ship. "You can't imprison an entire species in their own star system." The alien's expression didn't change. "We can, and we will. This is not a negotiation. This is a sentence." In the days that followed, more Concord vessels arrived, positioning themselves in a perfect sphere around the Terran system. Their technology was far beyond anything the Terrans could counter. Military leaders demanded immediate action, politicians called for negotiations, and scientists scrambled to understand what was happening. But it was already too late. The Concord ships activated their devices simultaneously. A strange, shimmering barrier began to form between them, expanding and connecting until it enclosed the entire system. The barrier looked like a soap bubble stretched across the stars, distorting the view of distant galaxies. Terran ships tried to breach it, but their weapons were ineffective. Even communication signals were blocked, save for one final message from the Concord. "You are contained for the safety of the galaxy. You will remain in your star system until you prove yourselves worthy. If ever. This is our final word." Then the Concord vessels vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving Terrans trapped behind an invisible wall. Terra's most powerful telescopes could still see the stars beyond, but they were as unreachable as they had been before the invention of space travel. Panic spread across Terra in the weeks that followed. Economies collapsed, governments fell, riots broke out in major cities. The dream of reaching the stars had been snatched away just as it came within grasp. But Commander Rylan saw something else when he looked at that shimmering barrier. He saw a challenge. In an emergency session of the United Terran Council, Rylan stood before the world's leaders, his uniform crisp, his posture straight despite the exhausting weeks. "They think they've imprisoned us," he said, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. "But they've just given us the greatest gift possible: time and motivation." Council members looked on with uncertainty. "We were racing into space," Rylan continued, "trying to catch up with powers centuries ahead of us. Now, we'll do it our own way. Build our path to the stars from within. They think they know what Terrans can achieve. They haven't seen anything yet." His words stirred something in them, turning fear and anger into determination. Terrans had never taken well to being told what they couldn't do. The next day, the United Terran Council announced the formation of the Systemic Development Initiative. Every nation pooled resources, brightest minds, and collective resolve into a single goal: turning the Terran system into a civilization that would shame their jailers. As Rylan watched the announcement from Orbital Station Artemis, a small smile crossed his face. The stars beyond the barrier seemed to twinkle with possibility. The aliens thought they were protecting the galaxy from Terrans. Instead, they had just challenged them to become something greater, something no one, human or alien, had ever imagined. The barrier hung silently in space, marking the beginning of Terra's greatest test. The race to prove themselves worthy of the stars had begun, but they would do it on their own terms. The exile had started, but it wasn't an end. It was only the beginning. 50 years passed since the barrier went up. The old Terra was gone, transformed by necessity and ambition. Where once there were separate nations competing for resources, now there was a unified system-wide civilization stretching deeper into space each year. Dex worked on the fringes of this expansion, guiding his mining ship through the asteroid belt. The vessel's mechanical arms stretched like a metal spider, breaking down a tumbling rock for precious metals. Born in space, he belonged to the first generation that had never felt Terra's gravity. "Control! This is Deep Miner 7, he called through the comm. "We've hit something unusual in asteroid 2245. A response crackled back. "Define unusual, Deep Miner 7. Dex stared at his scanner. "Metal. Refined metal. And it's old. Really old." Within hours, research ships arrived. What Dex had discovered wasn't just any metal. It was the first proof that Terrans weren't the only ones to have visited their system. Buried deep in the asteroid lay an ancient alien outpost, abandoned for millions of years. Dr. Isara, the lead researcher, floated through the outpost's corridors, her flashlight illuminating strange symbols on the walls. "This changes everything," she whispered, voice filled with awe. "The Concord didn't just trap us in our own system. They trapped us in a library." The discovery ignited a frenzy across the asteroid belt. Mining ships were reassigned to research duties. Every rock big enough to hide a secret was meticulously examined. More ruins surfaced, each containing fragments of forgotten knowledge. But the greatest breakthrough came on Ares. Deep beneath the red planet's surface, in a canyon once carved by ancient rivers, the research team discovered a vast complex of alien machinery, still powered after millions of years. Leading the effort, Dr. Isara stood in the humming corridors of this alien structure. "It's not just technology," she told the Systemic Council via hologram. "It's knowledge. Whoever built this was more advanced than the Concord, and they left it all behind for someone to find." These alien ruins revealed entirely new ways of manipulating energy, matter, and space, concepts beyond conventional Terran science. The ancient aliens had preserved their knowledge in crystalline databanks that could interface with human-built computers. Terran scientists, from Ares to Orbital Station Artemis, worked day and night to decipher these breakthroughs. In orbit around Solus, massive research labs harnessed the star's energy for experiments impossible on Terra. Meanwhile, colonies on Ares expanded as researchers arrived to study the alien facility. Not everyone looked only to the past. Like Dex, many turned their eyes to the future. The asteroid belt evolved into a network of factories and habitats. Automated mining ships gathered resources, while gigantic orbital foundries produced everything from starship parts to household goods. "We're not just surviving anymore," Dex told his crew, watching the construction of a new habitat. "We're building something new, something better." The Systemic Development Initiative exceeded all expectations. Fusion power, perfected with insights from the alien ruins, offered limitless energy. Advanced manufacturing in microgravity created materials once deemed impossible. Early terraforming efforts began on Ares, using techniques that seemed like magic just 50 years earlier. But the biggest change was in the people themselves. Children born in space regarded the barrier not as a prison wall, but as a challenge. They grew up learning both Terran science and alien principles, their imaginations soaring beyond the limitations that once bound their ancestors. In the humming depths of the alien complex on Ares, Dr. Isara marveled at how the Concord's actions had backfired. "They wanted to contain us," she said quietly. "Instead, they gave us the perfect conditions to become more." Outside, the barrier still shimmered in silent vigilance, unchanged after half a century. But beyond it, Terrans changed in ways that would one day shock their wardens. By attempting to lock them down, the Conquered had sealed them in with exactly what they needed to surpass their captors. 100 years into the exile, the Terran system was nearly unrecognizable. Solus, once a scorching ball of rock, now glittered with solar collectors that wrapped its equator in a metallic belt, each panel precisely tracking the star's movement. Their combined output powered the entire civilization. On Seren, Peter stood at the observation deck of Station 1, watching enormous floating cities drift through the orange clouds below. Though the planet's surface remained extremely harsh, the upper atmosphere had become home to millions. Cloud harvesters extracted water and minerals from the dense air, while gas processors produced breathable atmospheres for the floating cities. "Remember the old images of Seren?" Tom, his colleague, asked, joining him at the window. 100 years ago, everyone said it was impossible to live here." Peter nodded, checking atmospheric readings on his tablet. The cities used advanced materials, developed from alien ruin research, that let them hover indefinitely while resisting the caustic environment. Each city was self-sustaining, connected by a steady flow of transport ships. Yet Seren wasn't the crowning achievement. That belonged to Ares. The red planet's skies had shifted from dusty rust to bluish purple. Huge atmospheric processors derived from ancient alien tech thickened the air and warmed the surface. Lowland basins held the first oceans, seeded with engineered algae to generate oxygen. "Control, this is Terraform Station 5, a voice crackled over the comm. "The new bacterial strain is performing above expectations. Oxygen levels are up another 2% this month." Around Juno, equally dramatic transformations were underway. Its major moons evolved into bustling colonies. Ice miners on Europa-like worlds supplied water throughout the system, while another large moon, comparable to Ganymede, hosted the biggest space dock ever built, assembling starships in low gravity. Meanwhile, the asteroid belt thrived as the system's industrial core, its myriad rocks reconfigured into a vast web of factories. "We're ahead of schedule," Peter said, looking over system-wide progress reports. "Kronos' colonies might be ready for full habitation 5 years sooner than we thought." Society itself had also transformed. Terran languages mixed and blended, forging new dialects. A generation accustomed to zero-G or low-G life viewed the universe in ways earlier Terrans couldn't conceive. "They fear we'll break out," Tom remarked, scanning a news feed from one of the outer habitats. "But they have no idea how different we've become." Across the system, scientists labored in secret on a singular goal: overcoming the barrier. The barrier that had seemed unbreakable might have cracks, especially when approached from a perspective the conquered never dreamed possible. As the sun set on Seren Station 1, bathing the cloud-top cities in golden light, Peter reflected on how the Concorde's plan had catastrophically miscalculated. By forcing Terrans to rely solely on themselves and the resources of their own system, they had spurred breathtaking ingenuity. Terran technology now followed principles the Concorde never imagined. "Have you seen the latest data from the Tethys project?" Tom asked, swiping open a holographic display. "They've modified the processors to handle methane cycles. We could see habitable domes there in a decade." Peter scanned the figures, impressed. By combining knowledge gleaned from alien ruins with homegrown creativity, Terrans had far exceeded what even the ancient aliens likely intended. "They wanted to keep us down," Peter said quietly. "All they did was force us to become something greater." The barrier still shimmered, a silent sentinel around the Terran system after a century. But inside, everything had changed, and the Concorde still had no inkling what was coming. Dr. Celia stood in front of the holographic display, watching the simulation run for what felt like the 1,000th time. The barrier's energy patterns rippled across the screen like waves in a digital sea. After nearly 150 years, someone had finally found a vulnerability. "Run it again," she instructed, eyes glued to the data. In the secret lab deep within Tethys's research complex, Banks of computers hummed with power. The answer to breaching the barrier hadn't come from studying the barrier itself. It came from synthesizing the lessons of those ancient ruins on Ares and generations of Terran innovation. "Dr. Celia!" her assistant called, voice trembling with excitement. "The quantum readings match! It's not just a theory. This is real!" The breakthrough was deceptively simple. The barrier functioned less like a wall and more like a lens, warping space to prevent faster-than-light travel. But if you could bend space in a different direction, one the Concorde had never considered, you could slip right past it. They named it the Mirror Drive. Word spread like lightning. Research teams across the Terran system pored over the data. At a concealed shipyard orbiting Juno, the first test craft took shape. Small and crewed by only 3, the vessel embodied the hopes of an entire civilization. Commander Oren stood on the observation deck as the last components were fitted. "It's beautiful," he said, admiring the ship's graceful lines. Unlike the Concorde's hulking warships, the craft was sleek, based on a wholly new understanding of space-time. At last, the day came. The tiny ship, named Breakthrough, positioned itself near the barrier. Sensors and watchers across the system stood by, breath held. This would be the first real attempt to break their chains in a century and a half. "Mirror drive powering up," the ship's engineer reported. "All systems nominal." Dr. Celia observed from the control center, heart pounding. Breakthrough's engines glowed with an otherworldly light, space rippling around them. "Drive at full power," came the next call. "Initiating transition in 3, 2, 1. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship's image seemed to double. One stayed in place while the other slid away on a skewed angle that hurt the eye to track. And then, it vanished. Time stretched out. A minute. 2. Had it worked? Or had they just watched the ship disappear forever? 3 minutes later, exactly as predicted, the breakthrough reappeared, well beyond the barrier. "Breakthrough to control," Commander Oren's voice crackled. "The mirror drive works. We're free." Cheers erupted everywhere. Stations, colonies, habitats across the system. The Concorde's century-old prison had just been breached, but Dr. Celia remained focused on the next phase. The mirror drive was more than a way through the barrier. It was a revolution in propulsion itself, a method the Concorde had never even imagined. "Begin mass production," she ordered. "We'll have a fleet ready in 6 months." The Concorde had overlooked a vital truth. By cutting Terrans off from established methods, they forced them to develop a path no one else had. As the breakthrough returned through its mirror-like portal, Celia thought of how unprepared the Concorde would be. Their network was based on technology millennia old. Terrans were about to unveil a new approach so far beyond them that it might as well be magic. "Send a message to all colonies," Celia said, voice steady. "Tell them to prepare. The exile is over." The Concorde's distant monitoring station registered the impossible on a day that began quietly. A Terran ship appeared outside the barrier, from the outside in. The celestial Concorde erupted in panic. The Ancient Council raced to convene an emergency session, their luminous forms flickering in heated debate. "Impossible!" the leader exclaimed, crystalline facets blazing with alarm. "No vessel can breach the barrier from the outside." But the evidence was irrefutable. Terrans had escaped their cosmic jail and were venturing far beyond it, using impenetrable new technology the Concorde's own experts couldn't decipher. The mirror drive ships moved like phantoms, popping in and out of normal space without any of the known signs of FTL. Commander Terran steered the newly christened Starfinder, Terra's first dedicated diplomatic vessel, straight toward a bustling trade station. Alien craft parted nervously at its approach, their crews stunned to see humans so far from Terra. "This is the Terran vessel Starfinder," Terran broadcast. "We come in peace, seeking mutual trade and dialogue." A response emerged unexpectedly from the traders, a pragmatic species known for commerce. Their ships, aglow with complex patterns of light, edged closer. "Your arrival was unforeseen," the trader spokesperson said, its musical language translated into Terran speech. "But potentially profitable. Let us see what Terra offers." And Terra had much to offer. Their centuries of isolation had produced inventions the galaxy had never witnessed. Solar nets to power entire planets, atmospheric processors for terraforming, and, most valuable of all, the mirror drive, which rendered the Concorde's controlled transport routes obsolete. "Your technology," the trader rep said, examining a simple fusion cell. "It's not merely advanced. It's different." Terran allowed himself a small grin. "We had to find our own way forward once the Concorde stopped us from using theirs." Word of Terra's re-emergence raced across the galaxy. The Concorde tried to keep it contained, but it was too late. Terran ships appeared everywhere, forging trade deals and offering technology that defied the old ways. Many worlds found it irresistible. The Concorde called another emergency session. "These Terrans must be contained," the leader insisted. "They disrupt the natural order." But some Concorde member worlds were already backing away. Why rely on the Concorde's archaic, expensive FTL routes when mirror drives could appear anywhere in an instant? "The military option is not viable," a junior Concorde official reported. "Their defensive capabilities exceed projections. Several of our key allies have already begun negotiations with Terra." In a matter of months, Terrans had done what the Concorde most feared. They changed the entire galactic dynamic, not by war or subjugation, but by invention and commerce. Standing at a viewport on the Starfinder, Terran watched alien freighters dock at Terra's new outpost station. Humans and aliens worked side by side, exchanging goods and ideas. "Your people have learned to think differently," noted a trader envoy. "You see solutions where the Concorde sees only barriers." Meanwhile, the Concorde's power, built on tight control of FTL networks, slipped away. Their fleets were outdated, their trade routes bypassed. Even loyal worlds began questioning why they had ever accepted so many constraints. On the diplomatic channel, Terran received constant requests for demonstrations of Terran achievements, atmospheric processors for harsh worlds, mirror port gateways to remote systems, and new forms of sustainable energy. "Send them our standard proposal," Terran ordered. "We're open to trade, and we'll share what we've learned." That was the critical difference. Where the Concorde demanded obedience, Terrans offered partnerships. Where the Concorde hoarded technology, Terrans shared it. Terran sensors caught a Concorde vessel spying on them at the edge of the sector. They could watch all they liked. They couldn't replicate Mirror Drive's fundamental principles. "Shall we acknowledge them?" Terran's first officer asked. He shook his head. "Let them see exactly what they created by trying to cage us." The Concorde had sought to prevent Terran aggression. Instead, they had unleashed something far more transformative: Terran innovation. Captain Thomas surveyed the alien world below from his ship's bridge. Newly modified atmospheric processors, derived from Ares technologies, were converting toxic gases into breathable air. This world, long deemed useless by the Concorde, was fast becoming a paradise. "The colonists can land next week," his science officer reported with satisfaction. "Air is already breathable in the lowlands." Such transformations were happening all across the galaxy. Worlds considered uninhabitable by Concorde standards were being rejuvenated using Terran methods. The solar net designs from Solus powered them, while the advanced floating cities of Seren were replicated for gas giants in every region of known space. "Captain," the comms officer spoke up, "we've received another request for protective status. Third one this week." The Concorde's power base was collapsing. More worlds sought Terra's help and technology every day. Rather than conquer, the Terrans simply offered better ways to solve old problems. They feared we'd destroy them, said Ambassador Rod, a tall alien from a breakaway Concord world. But you do not destroy, you elevate. Thomas nodded. Another mirror drive ship materialized above the planet, carrying Terran engineers who would oversee the next phase of terraforming. The Concord demanded we follow their ancient rules, Thomas said, reviewing data from across the galaxy. We offer freedom and progress. Which one do you think people prefer? In 1,000 systems, Terran innovations were supplanting the Concord's stagnation. Energy networks improved, vessels upgraded, entire civilizations awakened to new possibilities. Reports poured in, fringe worlds adopting Terran-based industries, Concord strongholds losing their grip, and alien species once isolated, now thriving under Terran assistance. Another diplomatic mission request, the communications officer interrupted. The mineral-rich colonies want to overhaul their mining operations using Terran methods. Thomas allowed a faint smile. The Concord had spent centuries convincing the galaxy there was no alternative. Now everyone saw there were infinite alternatives, most simpler, cheaper, and more equitable than the Concord's approach. Send them our standard offer, he replied. We're happy to help. Terran solutions spread like wildfire. Even worlds that still respected the Concord found themselves questioning. Why were we denied these advances for so long? A Concord scout ship lingered at the system's periphery, likely trying to reverse engineer mirror drive readings. But they never could. The Terran's path had branched so far from the Concord's that catching up would be a generational effort. Should we hail them? Thomas's first officer asked again. No need, Thomas said. Let them keep watching. The Concord once feared Terran warfare. Instead, they faced something far more dangerous to an empire. Terran ideas. Commander Silas stood at the center of the new galactic assembly, gazing out at representatives from 1,000 worlds. The chamber, situated right where the barrier had once encircled the Terran system, symbolized everything that had changed over 2 centuries. 200 years ago, Silas began, my ancestor watched the Concord imprison us behind their barrier. Today I stand before a new galaxy, one that moves forward together. The Assembly's grand hall, built using the floating city principles from Seren and powered by solar nets from Solus, now hosted delegates of every major species, including former Concord members. Seated among them was the once powerful Concord leader, its crystalline body dulled with age. Its dominion, once absolute, now subsisted within a cooperative framework that Terra had championed. Your people have changed everything, the leader said softly to Silas before the session, but not how we feared. We expected conquerors, and got teachers. The Terran system had grown into a nexus of galactic civilization. The barrier that once symbolized Terran captivity had been repurposed into a memorial and an energy network fueling a massive transport hub. Every day, ships arrived from across the galaxy via mirror drives that Terra now shared openly. The Ares Academy welcomes students from all worlds, Silas announced. Our universities, research centers, and labs are open to all who seek knowledge. The ancient ruins that had sparked Terra's transformation became part of the largest collaborative research complex in the known galaxy. Scientists from every species worked together there, exploring new horizons once forbidden by the Concord's strict rules. We've detected signals from outside our galactic border, a researcher said during the assembly session. With optimized mirror drive systems, we could reach them within a year. Excitement rippled through the hall. The old Concord would have banned such risky exploration. Now, a joint mission involving dozens of worlds was already in motion. Seren served as the model for atmospheric engineering, inspiring planetary transformation across countless systems. Solus's solar collectors found new applications on stars of every classification. The asteroid belt's enormous factories and orbital habitats served as an example of advanced industrial synergy, while the colonization methods first tested around Juno were replicated near gas giants across the galaxy. Terra remembers its isolation, Silas continued. We recall what it was like to be told we were unworthy of the stars. But we choose a different path. We choose to share, to teach, to help others realize their potential. The Concorde's once tight fist had fully relaxed. Their ancient star lanes were abandoned in favor of mirror drive routes. Their worlds integrated into this new assembly, forging partnerships the Concorde could never have imagined. The Terrans taught us to think differently, said Ambassador Rod, now a senior figure in the assembly. They showed us that progress need not be feared. Change can unite rather than destroy. Concluding his address, Silas looked at the assembly's Great Seal. A stylized depiction of the Terran system with its old barrier reshaped into a radiant gateway, encircled by the emblems of all member worlds. We stand at a fresh start, he said. The stars aren't our limit. They're our launching point. Thunderous applause filled the chamber as delegates from worlds once estranged stood in unison. The new assembly was the embodiment of everything the Concorde had once tried to prevent, but in a peaceful, collaborative form they never anticipated. Later, as Silas watched ships coming and going via mirror portals, he reflected on the irony. The Concorde had feared terrible warfare, but instead got a gentle revolution of cooperation and invention. They had tried to cage Terrans, but in so doing, they had set the stage for a technological leap that reshaped the galaxy. Another vessel vanished into its mirror-like entry point, bound for the galaxy's remote frontiers. Silas smiled. The exile had ended ages ago, but its lesson remained crystal clear. The worst prison is thinking there's only one way forward. Terrans had found another way, and now the entire galaxy was exploring new paths with them.